If you would like to do something significant in your life and become successful in what you're doing, then you need to catch this next podcast with Robb Nash. We talk about mental health, but we talk about the journey and the growth that comes through going through something that is very impactful and how we turn it around, and also all the lessons along the way and becoming a person of significance. Catch you in this podcast.
Some people think you can't say you think you only have mental health struggles if you are bipolar, or you have autism, or if you're OCD, or you're schizophrenic. It's like, no, like mental health is like physical health. Uh,
I have in front of me a gentleman that is, how do I say it? Uh, Cares beyond caring, yet doesn't like that everything's about him. It's about somebody else, which makes this interview, which makes this chat so much more enjoyable and so much more challenging at the same time.
mm,
But he has a documentary that's coming out about his life, about the impact that he's having, the significance that he'd like to see coming out. And let me say, Robb Nash, welcome. I'm so grateful to have you with me today.
Thank you. Yeah, you say I don't like talking about myself. I have a problem just listening to what that was 30 seconds and I got an issue just you saying nice things about me. Because our industry of music, as your viewers probably can see, and the listeners, you don't know, but there's a lot of guitars and records on the wall behind me. But our industry is so conceited, and there's so much ego that I try to avoid it, because people expect that of you, so thank you. That was very kind. It's hard, but yeah, thank you.
Robb, that's so challenging for people to even comprehend when they see basically a musician, a rock star that appears in front of thousands, sometimes in front of a few people, but sometimes in front of thousands and thousands of people, to understand that internally you still struggle with attention. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on what your motive is. It's like, yeah, I'm from Canada. I'll give you an example. Okay. I'm from Canada. We love a sport called hockey. Now, there's different types of hockey players. If you play on a Canadian hockey team, you are not walking around the streets without people wanting autographs and pictures, right? You're a star. But you live in California. You have the LA Kings. You have you've got more than one team. Why am I blanking? San Jose. You've got. If you're playing for the LA Kings, Rima, would you recognize if an LA King walked by you?
Personally, no.
Right. Definitely not the same way. It wouldn't be the same attention that you get in Canada, right? So professional athletes, you make a lot of money and all that stuff, but to the person that wants, there's one person that would, I want to play in Toronto because you're like the top sport, the most favorite. Like we have the Toronto Raptors, we've got the football team, Toronto Argonauts and stuff, but if you're playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, the hockey team, man, everywhere you go. So if you sign to play for the LA Kings, play hockey, you're still getting lots of money and stuff like that. But one player, it'll probably affect where they choose to play, because one place you're going to be like a god. Everybody's like, whoa, and the next person's going, I don't need that. Do you know what I mean? So I think we're all wired a little differently. I'm not saying everybody that is famous has bad motives and wants attention, but there's part of that in there, like, and what I try, part of me is it was never my goal to be famous or anything like that. And I'm not saying I'm Justin Bieber or anything like that. I don't get mobbed or anything wherever I go. But for me as well, it's I'm trying to do something different with what I do. I never really wanted to be famous in that way, but I do want to have the opportunity to talk to people. I want the ability to have an impact on people. It is why I chose this. And what I'm trying to do as well is I never want the intro you just gave me, right down to gentleman, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I've ever heard somebody call me a gentleman before. But part of it feels good. I just always want to check that it never goes from here to here. And it's, yeah, I am that. I am award winning, because it gets dangerous in that moment, but it does. I'm not saying it doesn't feel good. It's thank you for that. That was nice, but you just have to be careful and guard yourself that you don't become, we tour with a lot of big bands, and it gets to some of them and you start to think something of yourself that isn't real, and you have to guard that. That's what I try to do. Try.
I think you just summed up exactly what attracts a lot of individuals towards you and towards your mission and towards what you're doing is that you check with yourself. You don't take it to a level where you're red. Your mission is what's driving you. And you didn't set out on this mission to begin with. Let me go back for a little second. The documentary is genuinely incredible, Rob, uh, because you and I have done a couple of podcasts, so I knew bits and pieces of the story of your life, but to see all the pieces fitting together and to really hear of how you grew up and all the people that are impacted now because of your journey is genuinely so incredible to draw out of that everybody can make a difference.
Yeah.
Everybody can be significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know if you probably won't brag about yourself because you're also quite humble, but for those wanting to go, oh, I want to see this documentary, depending on when you're watching this, but as we tape this right now, nobody can watch that documentary. um, we shot it during COVID. It was an incredible experience. It was very difficult, a lot of it, as they recreated the accident scene exactly where it happened with the same vehicle. I had to walk up, for those who don't know my story, I was in a massive car accident where I was resuscitated, and they recreated that scene, and I had to walk up on an actor who was getting resuscitated at the same place where it happened to me. And yeah, that was, it brought something very raw out of me. But Ring was very modest. And because we had done two podcasts together, we scheduled a third one. And what was it? The day before, I believe I called her and it said, look, I'm such a fan of yours. I do a lot of interviews, but I was like, before we do this next one, would you like to watch this documentary? It's done. It's not finished. They're doing some edits to it and stuff like that, but I wanted you to see it because I wanted to, we've done two podcasts like this, lengthy ones, and I trust you. I wanted to see what it might draw out of you because you would get to see. So you're one of very few people that have seen it, at least at the time of us filming this right now, depending on when you're watching this. But yeah, I've been kind of counting down to this moment where I'm curious to see what you think, because yeah, you got to see, yeah, it went to my childhood. We went to the house where I grew up. We went to the church I attended. You got to see those things. So I'm really curious to see where you go with it. And I trust you with that because your intentions have seemed like nothing but pure to me. So
Rob, thank you. I appreciate everything you said and really watching the documentary. I think what it's going to do for a lot of individuals is going to make parents understand what their kids are possibly going through. And it's going to give a lot of young individuals and even adults the ability to step out and take care of themselves and really not stay in the dark. So let me start off by going, even understanding your background as a child and how you grew up within a religious family. What do you believe, honestly, the impact on you today, now that it's been multiple decades from being a child? What's the impact still on you growing up in a very religious family?
Yeah. Well, as you saw in that documentary, I grew up and I wasn't really allowed to, go to the movies or listen to mainstream music or watch TV a lot. Like it was very limited. It was very sheltered. And I think, and I want to say this, I think, people don't, parents don't do that with the intent of um, anything negative. It might be how they were brought up. And my parents, their parents were even more conservative and whatnot. But so you're doing it. I think you're trying to protect, your kids. You're curious even today. You're wondering, what is my kid seeing on TikTok? What are they seeing on their phone? What are they accessing? So you want to protect your kids, and I understand that. So it's not that I think anybody had bad motives, and there's things that happen generationally, like it's if you had, as I deal with a lot, you talking with people, if your grandparents were addicts, the chance of your parents being addicts and you becoming an addict, that happens. So your environment. So I do want to say that I think it protected me from maybe a lot of what my friends see. But I moved out when I was 15 to go to a school where I got a scholarship and bursary to attend, as you saw in the documentary. And all of a sudden, you're moving out at 15, and now you're hearing music. You're hearing that I was never allowed to listen to at home. I had some friends listening to music like that a bit, and I played some drums and a little bit of guitar, but I was never allowed to listen to Guns N' Roses and Nirvana and Green Day and all these things. And then you move out, and all of a sudden, the culture shock of when you're no longer under that protection, and all of a sudden you're seeing things, and right down to, this is fast forwarding, further down the road a bit, but I also, you don't, you go to a party and, you've never been around people having 3 beers. So you don't know how to drink in moderation. You don't know what happens when you have way too much. I remember waking up, we were playing volleyball and we went out, we snuck out to have some drinks, and all of a sudden we couldn't go back to school afterwards. And I woke up in a hotel or a motel with my friend, knew we couldn't get back to school. We'd be in so much trouble. And me and my best friend, like all of a sudden you're thrown into these things that, like, yes, people are trying to protect you, but all of a sudden you've got this culture shock and you're hearing things and you haven't developed your own filter because a filter was given to you or provided for you. You haven't had to make decisions of, this isn't, um, this language, if I speak this way to somebody, this is going to affect relationships. So it's just, you're not allowed to swear, you're not allowed to smoke, you're not allowed to drink. And I think that's what religion has often become, rather than, relational and spiritual and prayer and listening to promptings, which is very much my walk now, those things. Then it was, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs, don't wear a hat in church. like, and you're just waiting to not break a rule. And it got to the place, because you're living that mindset of, if you do something wrong and you get caught, you're in trouble. If that's how you are with your grandparents, your older brothers and sisters, and you're just trying not to get found out because you're going to get a punishment, that applied, as we've talked about in podcasts. You wake up in a hospital, don't know who you are. You go through so many surgeries, you're recovering, and then you've got this upbringing that says you were in a car accident because you did these things and you've been punished. It's this life of walking around and thinking the lightning could strike if I say or do the wrong thing. And rather than it being something, I wonder what I could do with my life if I listen to those promptings, if I'm not selfish today. What if I look outside of myself, which I think is where a lot of belief became from, and became a set of rules and boundaries.
You touch on so many things in this little bit. I'm going to touch on the filtration part
Sure.
because I was smirking at some of the things you're saying because every religion, I don't care what religion in the world, is the don't do this, da 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 da, the list goes on and on. How do you feel this filtration, whether it's religion or anything, someone raising you or allowing you to become yourself? How do you think that filtration plays into what you've seen now after all your shows with mental health? I'd love to hear Robb Nash's portion on it.
Well, I think, in life, people get caught on cliches so quickly, and maybe they came from religion, maybe it came from just um, ritual, maybe it came from, passed on from grandparents to parents, and I'll tell you this, like when people try to find the cliche, it's like, oh, don't worry, the pain will go away. Like, and you're trying to say something positive, right? So that's there's one. Okay, so remind me, I want to go through a few of these cliches, okay? But people will say like, oh, the pain will go away, don't worry, it'll go away. Then you meet somebody that lost their mom, and somebody goes, oh, don't worry, the pain will go away. No, it won't, and it shouldn't,
Mhm.
because every time you think of your mom, there will be some pain there. So when a kid walks up to you and says, everybody says the pain is going to go away, and a kid's standing in front of you and they said, the pain's not going away, what's wrong with me? Oh, there's nothing. You think the pain of losing your mom is going to go away? It's like, well, that's what everyone says. Oh, they're lying to you. It won't. And then all of a sudden there's a shock moment. This isn't going away. No, wait, would you want it to? Because the moment you think of your mom, oh, sorry, the moment it's no longer painful, it's like almost like you've forgotten about your mom. There will always be some pain when you think about your mom. Could be joy, there could be there could be great memories and all these, but there could be pain. There will be pain. So if you throw out a cliche, and you might throw it with good intentions, you're lying to somebody, and then you say, "Would you want it to go ahead?" Well, no. Is it always going to be a little painful thinking about your mom? Yeah, that's okay. And all of a sudden, the person like, really? Then you take it a step further. I remember meeting with one kid who grew up in the same area as me. And, my family, as you saw in the documentary, they said, you better figure out what you're doing wrong because God is clearly mad, so he spanked you with a semi-truck. Now, rather than just realizing my friend was driving too fast on an icy road, that's why we had an accident. Now my family has planted it in me that this was a punishment for something I've done. Now I've got to figure this out. So now instead of just going, shit happens and there's consequences to driving too fast on an icy road. Now it's like, now they're shifting my blame to God. God did this. Now I'm angry at that, right? So I remember meeting with somebody in the same area as me. Listen to my story. We did the show, and the person comes up and just walks up and said, and interesting that I just talked about a story of losing your mom, but this girl comes up and she goes, and she grew up in the same area as me, probably had similar teaching. She goes, so you're saying that God didn't kill my mom? I'm like, oh my God, that's not how that works. Like, I don't know how your mom died, but people pass and you have to, you're going to lose more than your mom before you're gone. We all are going to experience the death of people around us. And she's like, so I don't have to be mad at God. I'm like, no. Like, and I'm not trying to tell her to believe in God. I'm not pitching anything to her, but you could see somebody had put this on her and now she's got this resentment instead of just realizing that life is painful. There will be painful days, so I tried to find antidotes to combat those things. Like, I believe I said this in the last one, where when people say everything happens for a reason, everything, and everything does happen for a reason, but sometimes the reason is you were going too fast on an icy road. Um, if you have smoked your whole life, there could be consequences to that. There are reasons, but it's not always some divine thing. Now, I've seen some remarkable things happen in my life that I've seen all around me that are beyond coincidence. It's like, oh wow, that was not a coincidence. That was beautiful. That was the timing of that. That was not a coincidence. But to say everything happens for a reason, I need to find an antidote to that. So many people say that, and if you're listening or watching this, and that's your favorite quote, forgive me. If you're able to use that in your life, and it means something to you, and you've done something great with it, great. For me, I say bad things don't happen for a reason; they happen with potential. Tragedy can tear apart an individual, a family, a community, a country, or a whole region, as you can see in our world. And when it comes to the pain, right? I have a quote, and you saw it at the end of the documentaries. All the credits are rolling. You see all these tattoos of people tattooing the lyrics of my songs on their arms and quotes from stage. My antidote to, oh, don't worry, the pain will go away. Is hey, pain won't go away, but neither does the strength. If you wake up looking for pain, you will find it. If you wake up looking for strength, you can find that too. We have to make decisions. And when you just verbalize these things, or to the person that says, as I mentioned earlier, it's like everyone says the pain will go away, and it's not. What is wrong with me? Why am I wired this way? I'll be like, oh, yeah, I know you probably watch some of your friends and they can go through the same tough day and they can wipe it off, keep walking. They might appear that way, as I did, that they're unaffected. They might be hiding it. But some people react differently to emotion. And it's like, what if your emotion isn't a curse? What if it's a gift? What do you mean? You hurt deeply, don't you? Yes, but you love deeply, don't you? Yeah. And again, it's just rewiring the thinking and embracing and understanding tragedy, understanding emotion, and verbalizing it and understanding it. Sorry, I have long answers to
I
give.
love these answers because there's so much wisdom in them that a lot of people will take it to heart because it applies to them. What I'd love to know, Rob, you're a young man. The accident happens. You're being told that you're being punished by God.
Mhm.
How did you begin to go, that's not my perspective, and be okay with your family, or not be okay, honestly? Part of the documentary is that your brother didn't believe in what you were doing after the accident, didn't believe in your journey, and was very verbal about it. How did you, because I'm looking at someone that is really having a challenge with a person that they love, their family, and their perception is different than their family's perception, which is pretty much what you went through. How did you eventually start to go, I'm okay with who I am, and let them be okay with who they are? Or
Yeah.
did you?
Yeah. Well, it's always a process, right? Like, so I'll tell you this, you know, I might screw this up slightly and I can't tell you the source, but you hear somebody say, and rather than just like, what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, rather, right? So, and I'll tell you this, I can do a show in a prison and sit down with a kid that murdered his parents. And that's a terrible headline, but um, you just, for some reason, I just have this, oh, what did you go through? Like, I know what I went through to wire me the way I went. Like, it's now I can understand my own perspective. But sitting in a prison, it's like, oh, what did you go through to, like, there's a story to you, right? And for some reason, that's easy to do, or easier to do with strangers. To um to do that with your family and your close friends is very difficult. So what what you're referring to, again, to your listeners and viewers, like I have one brother that was willing to, and I'm proud of him for doing this. They interviewed my brother, my sister in this documentary, and not a lot of people would really admit how horrible they treated me when I decided to step away from and do something different, get tattoos and piercings and mohawk and play rock music, all those things that we were told are the definition of bad, right? And my brother Pete in the documentary, you heard him saying, like, I told him he was wrong. I crucified him. I was like, I, he told me if I ever got a piercing, he would rip it out of my face, right? And my siblings, as you saw in the documentary, are much older than I am. So I didn't just have a parent. I had all these older siblings to look after me that, and again, some great people. But yeah, you're right. It was difficult and it took me a while. Um, you want your parents proud of you. You want your siblings proud of you. You want your aunts and uncles all to go like, that's my nephew. That's my son. That's my brother. And, it took a while for a lot of them to come around, and there's still some work to be done. But but through that, I'll tell you this: I realized the strength you need. I mentioned this in the documentary. The strength you need to do what you do comes from within. It doesn't come from the people around you. Um, Man, what a bonus if you've got people cheering you on and in your corner, which I have. But man, when it's your siblings and your parents and they're not there in the beginning, um, that's difficult. But then I start to all of a sudden look at my dad, who lost his mom, who lost his dad, who he passed away a few years ago, but you couldn't get him really to talk about his upbringing. And then you just go like, the same way I'm willing to listen to an inmate and go, what did you go through to wire you this way and make you communicate the way you do, you know, um, and have the reactions you do to situations? Man, once I was able to start applying that to the people around me, all of a sudden, um, as you saw with my brother Pete, the big turnaround moment was I walked up to him and said, rather than waiting for him to say he's proud of me, I walked up and said, hey, I'm proud of you. And then he goes, and that kind of broke him. And then he was like, oh, maybe I should go see what Rob does. And yeah, he's come and volunteered and helped it as an usher at shows, and my sister as well. So yeah, I think if that's one thing I try to do, it's one thing I talk to a lot of young people about, and I think it's something we can all do is just have that perspective and go like, who said that to you in your past? And maybe now you're passing that on to me. Like, what did you go through to have you react this way to our conversation, to this conflict, to this tragedy? You can do those things. No, nobody's born with hate in their heart. Nobody's born with judgment. You watch kids play, and yeah, you get it. There's, yeah.
Just for the listeners, I know that they haven't seen the documentary yet. They may not have seen any of your YouTube or any of your music, heard any of your music. Rob went through a very horrific accident when he was 17, and we'll talk a little bit about that. He went through that and then became a musician who actually ended up with a record deal and walked away from the record deal for something that is more significant. And he didn't plan it that way. He did it because it felt right. And I'm saying that so that others that are listening can understand that you always have the power of choosing, no matter what you've been through, no matter what your upbringing is. We can make those choices. Rob, what does it feel like to look at the documentary and really see your entire life up to this day of who you are, what you've become? Because not many people are willing to face a lot of the things that have occurred in their life. And I think that's a draw for me.
Yeah, we, sometimes you'll have almost like a focus group where you'll like, or, as a musician, I'll write a new song and I'll show it to some people and you're kind of waiting, hearing their reaction because this is something very personal to you, and you're sharing it with the world. We did do around 10 screenings, small screenings of the documentary in Canada, in different theaters, different cities. And I'm talking bringing in 50 people to watch it. And you're sitting there in the audience, and it's really, first of all, awkward because normally when they do a documentary about somebody, it's after they've passed. So part of you sitting there going, you hear somebody near the end, it's like, man, Rob means this much to me, and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's almost like they're talking about you past tense. It's like, Rob was a great guy. It's like, oh, I'm still here. I'm not done this journey. Like I still, and yeah, I again, getting back to our introduction of ego and stuff like that. One thing that I hope, and you can tell me because you're one of few people to watch this, is I wanted this documentary, and you saw it. There's 6 people in the documentary, young people that through the years we had 917 students give us their suicide notes after these shows. 6 of them are in the documentary where we followed up with them. Where are they now? And I just wanted the documentary to be about them. And the producer and the director were like, we need to tell your story. You're kind of what brings it all together. And one thing, again, tell me if this came across, but I said, like, what I don't want people to think is that people have had breakthroughs through our interactions and handed over suicide notes saying, here, I no longer need this, and gone off to get with a school counselor or a psychologist or social worker. What I don't want people to think while watching that is that I walk up on stage and say, you should be like me. Here's how great I've been since 5 years old. I have been this great example to you of how I should be. I get on stage, and I hope this came across in the documentary, is here's the mistakes I've made. Here are some warnings, here. And if I could sum up one message in that documentary, it's that it's okay to start over wherever you started. Whether it's the girl in the documentary that was found on the train tracks the day after she was raped, and then put into lockdown, which is where a facility where I got to meet her. Whether it's Kobe, who you saw I met in prison, Indigenous kid that was in prison for several charges, including attempted murder ×5, conspiracy to commit murder, sorry, ×5. Or you are Cheyenne in the documentary, who just is a young girl who you would never think is dealing with suicidal thoughts. She's just looks like a typical beautiful girl with good marks, good family and stuff like that. Went through something. Regardless of what you've gone through or haven't gone through, you can start over. That's what I want the through story to be in the documentary, in my music, in conversation, in concerts. You can start over. And that's what I want people to know, is like, I'm willing to be raw and vulnerable from stage or in this interview, because I think we don't just you can learn from tragedy. You absolutely can, but you can also learn through stories. I think it's important that we all share our stories, because you'll have your own story, and something motivated you to start this podcast, right? And so and I'm sure you hear so many different stories. Stories are so powerful because you can listen to a story and go like, I don't want to end up making that same decision or going through that same thing. So yeah, that's what I hope people see. That's what I see when I watch the documentary. It's difficult, but I sit there and watch, and you see a kid driving bike away from the house you grew up in. It's chilling having actors play it all out in front of you. But whoa, the car accident scene was, yeah, it's a place I haven't gone to very often, for those who haven't watched the other two interviews, I don't remember getting hit by a semi truck. I don't remember that day or the day before. I'm missing about a month and a half of my life. Glad that I don't remember some of it, but to see it displayed in front of you and you're watching it and you see they found the same vehicle with the same paint job. They crushed it and tried to emulate exactly what it looked like, where it happened, and yeah, yeah, it's tough to leave me kind of without words, but that even thinking about that scene as you ask, I'm, yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to put it into words, which is rare for me. You can ask all the people around me.
The documentary is very authentic, Rob, because you are raw, because you do show up as you, and all the individuals that are in the documentary are very brave, brave to share of themselves. The young lady that shows up and says, I was raped. That's quite courageous. And it's wonderful to see that through what you've done, you sharing your most vulnerable stages in life allowed this young woman, allowed a lot of the young men to step up and go, I had suicidal thoughts. I was in this place. And the documentary is powerful in that, yes, it is very much about your story, but it is also so much about the impact that you are willing to be vulnerable, willing to be authentic, allowed these young kids that no one else that could show up and preach at them or talk to them could have reached them. And the documentary shows that really well. And I believe it's going to give hope to a lot of counselors. It's going to give hope to a lot of people that we can actually make an impact on mental health if we come at it from a much more real way.
Yeah, yeah,
Go ahead.
one thing we've done is with the documentary, we have somebody on our team who's got her master's degree in curriculum writing. And we got input from psychologists and social workers, teachers, counselors, and we actually broke up that documentary into episodes and turned it into like a teacher resource slash curriculum. And in the States, you have states. Here we have provinces. It's being taught in 9 provinces in one territory right now in Canada, where imagine turning that documentary into episodes. So right now in schools in Canada, someone can sit in class with their classmates and they watch a 10-minute version of my story. They watch a music video and then they're asked in their computers to journal about what they've learned from it. What was Robb's struggle? What was his breakthrough? How did he get help? How is he helping other people in their journey? What did they learn from Robb's story the next day or the next week, depending on how the teacher wants to teach it? They'll watch Dylan's story. They'll watch next day, next week, they'll watch Maya's story, Cheyenne's story, and they journal what they're learning from all of these episodes and from what they're learning from these stories. So it starts off like, what did you learn from this person? After the last episode, they're asked, what's your story? Where could you find a breakthrough? How could you get help? And they can journal, and the journal entries go directly to the school staff, the counselors. And consistently, I believe my team has told me, I might get these figures slightly wrong, but 60% of the students that are going through the curriculum are self-identifying at the end that they would help with their mental health. 20% consistently. We've been running this for a few years here. 20% that staff say we're flying completely under the radar until they saw those journal entries. Teachers are saying, I've been teaching this kid for 3 years. Counselors saying, this kid's been here for 3 years. I had no idea that this is what they were struggling with. So it talks about that vulnerability. Now, somebody might say, like, you're stirring that up, you're bringing it out, but that's why you can go to a psychologist for 2 years with appointments. And I'm not discouraging that. That's great. But the whole goal is to go, do you know what your struggle is? Do you know your trauma? Do you understand it? So if you can draw that out by using stories like Maya, the one you're talking about, like Dylan, as they can see other young people that are willing to be vulnerable, and then they go, what's your story? Oh, and all of a sudden you're self-realizing. And there's a great study done very recently. Maybe I'll send this to you and you can include it underneath, at least on the YouTube. Let me find it. One of my team just sent this to me the other day, but I'm looking where it was done, but it just talks about observing your emotions. Forgive me for this break, but this is good. Scientists at UCLA found that when we name our emotions, we dampen their intensity. Image studies show one of the structures of the brain tasked with emotion decreased its activity when people engaged with affect labeling. When naming the emotion, the frontal lobe, part of the rational brain, was put to work. Labeling seems to distract the emotional brain by engaging a cognitive process, allowing individuals to look at the situation more rationally. So it's like getting your emotional side to work with the logical side. And once you name and talk about your trauma and your emotion, it automatically it loses its intensity, as you can see. That was just a small paragraph of that, which I didn't know I was going to bring up today. But that's why it's like some people say you don't don't talk about this stuff. This is dangerous. This is, you don't want to stir things up. We've been to some places where, sometimes it's ignorance from a principal or a teacher saying, oh, we're actually a drug-free high school. You don't have to talk about drug issues here. It's like, oh, good for you. That's amazing. You should write a book. But other people, they're scared to go there because it is dangerous. Like it is, there's no safe, sanitized way to talk about mental health. But if you get kids to talk it out with a friend, a parent, a counselor, or get them to write it out, it's proven that it disarms it. And the thought that talking about mental health gives it more power has been completely refuted by science.
I agree 1000%. I taught a class for a period of time. I still teach it every once in a while. And it delves into a lot of how a person becomes themselves through looking at themselves and looking at others at the same time. And when we first begin the journey, you will see a lot of the young individuals that are very set in their ways of how they think of someone else. But as we go through the process and they start to see that nobody arrives at where they are just haphazardly, they have gone through things. But allowing them to see it through that lens and to begin to speak about it and to begin to identify it within themselves is the greatest miracle, because now they can understand that they are the cure for themselves. Right. And I see your program, I see that what you guys are doing is exactly that, allowing people to talk about it, not in a shameful way at all, but to actually express ourselves, because mental health isn't in young individuals, it's everywhere. Who doesn't have some kind of a mental health challenge within themselves that there's need to work on if they're willing to be vulnerable and look at it from an inner perspective?
Yeah.
And that's what this program, that's what this documentary really showed me about. That you lent a hand, but they had to do the work. They had to step up.
Yeah. Um, I talked about this a lot last podcast, but Dylan's an example, and not everybody has seen it, so I'll repeat myself. But you'll have seen. You might have other questions or comments about Dylan, but you're talking about the kid has to do their own work. We all have to, right? So when you get in front of 500, 1,000, 5,000 students, you're laying out the same message, right? And I meet Dylan afterwards, and he was willing to receive that day. He has to be willing to do that, right? He had to be willing to apply it to his life, that maybe there is something to me. We had a conversation. I'm going to say we probably spent 5 minutes together after the show where he had had suicide attempts. He didn't just have a suicide note, he had a suicide book. He had written over 100 pages of things that he hated about himself. And he goes, "You're telling me that I'm not cursed, that I'm gifted?" I'm like, "Absolutely, man. You hurt deeply, but you love deeply, don't you?" Yeah. All those things we've been talking about. And I said, don't shut off these emotions. They're not a curse. Channel them. Do you like to paint? Do you like to dance? Do you like to sing? Do you like poetry? Do you like music? What's a good way that you could express yourself? And he goes, "I love music." Yeah, if you could play an instrument, what would you play? He says guitar. And so I said play, but he only has one arm. He just has an elbow on the one side. And there's a perfect moment of what you're talking about. I leave. I don't, I can't tell him to pick up a guitar the next day. I can't tell him to try to figure out how to play with an elbow and 5 fingers. He has to put in the work. We all have to put in the work. You're so right. And you can't just, like, we all have these decisions to make, and it's true. Some people think you can't say you think you only have mental health struggles if you are bipolar, or you have autism, or if you're OCD, or you're schizophrenic. It's like, no, like, mental health is like physical health. There are days where you feel 80%, and there's days you feel 20. Not everybody knows those extremes of being bipolar and schizophrenia. Those are very real, but we all have those. If you think you don't, you're kidding the world if you say you've never had a tough day where you just feel like, oh man, what am I doing with my life? I feel like even the idea of being stuck in a routine, right? That's like, you start to question, like, why am I here? Does my life matter? Like, would anybody notice if I'm gone? Like, all of a sudden you go down these trails, but you think that's a bad trail to go down. Would anybody care if I was gone? No. And you could take that and go like, I'm going to play that out, right? I'm going to act that out and find out if anybody cares if I'm gone. I'm going to attempt. I'm going to watch this reaction. Or, as you saw in the documentary, I spoke about this, for a year and a half after my accident, I was terrified to fall asleep because I found out that my heart stopped. Well, and what if I wouldn't have started again? What if that person wouldn't have been there to resuscitate me? And then all of a sudden you're going, and every night I was having this nightmare watching my own funeral, and nobody showed up. Nobody cared that I lived or that I died. Same thing. Would the world care if I was gone? So you can take that and go, yeah, nobody would. Yeah. And you just follow that trail, or you follow that trail. Everything happens with potential. And you go like, I want the world. I want my family to have memories of me. I want to have an impact on the community around me. I'm going to do something with my life. I'm going to listen to the promptings I have. I'm going to have somebody that's going to have a story to say, my life was better because Rima was here. I have stories to say. So you can follow that same question of, would the world even notice if I was gone? No, they wouldn't. And downward spiral. Or would the world even notice that I was gone? They should. They should notice if I wasn't here anymore. I should make memories with people. I should leave an impact, a footprint. That's an example of I don't know where we started with that.
That's good, because what you're bringing to my mind, which you bring up in the documentary, the importance of pain in our life. Would you elaborate on that a little more? Because so many people are attempting to avoid pain.
Yeah. And there's pain you want to avoid, but what I brought up in the documentary is, um, you know, when you talk about my accident and this side of my head is metal and there's metal in here and there's, my back is thrown off this way and there's issues with this and this and this. But one thing that I mentioned in the documentary is I lost the feeling in these three fingers. I can feel with these two, but it's all the way up the arm. There's no feeling. It's a tingling still. So what I brought up in the documentary, it's like, well, that's annoying. I can hold a guitar pick and I can play, but I can't finger pick. I can't feel the other strings. So it's annoying. It works great in a hockey fight. But what I mentioned in the documentary is, man, there's been times where all of a sudden I look and I'm bleeding, or I've touched my hand on the stove and it's like, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I burnt myself. And you didn't notice that something was wrong. And yeah, like there's a little nugget that came out of the documentary that you would have asked before, right? But that's when you realize pain plays a role in our lives. It lets you know that something's up. Like if you are, I've got a friend who's in a wheelchair, he broke his back, and all of a sudden something's not right, but his body isn't sending him the signals. All of a sudden, he has a sore on his leg. He broke his leg, and his body wasn't sending him the right signals until, all of a sudden they noticed something was up visually. But pain tells you to take your hand off the stove. There's something wrong. So pain, and think about that, how that applies emotionally and mentally and spiritually. Something's up. You need to address this. And that's the moment you are talking about in the documentary. Pain plays a role. It lets you know something's up that you need to address.
I watched that documentary 3 times, and I could watch it again, honestly, Rob, because every time I watch it, I go, oh, there's this message. There's this message, because a part of me is always looking for, what can I ask Rob that would be significant for Rob and yet would make an impact on somebody else to go, I can make it. I can do this. I can become a better version of me, so that we end up with better humanity for all of us. In a way, I'm selfish in my quest, because I'm looking for betterment of humanity for all of us, not just for me, but for everyone that's around me. So this documentary has so many pieces. What I'd love to know, and what I'd love for the audience to understand, is how did you even arrive at meeting all these individuals? Because you're not playing all the time to tens of thousands. You're playing at juvenile halls. You're playing at detention centers. You're playing for indigenous people. Would you take me through some of the pieces and share what that's like when you have another human staring back at you as you're doing your art, but you're doing the art for much more than the art?
Yeah. So again, as you saw in the documentary, you see footage of me playing for tens of thousands of people and stage diving and crowd surfing, and man, that it's enjoyable. I don't ever want to make it sound like I didn't enjoy that stuff. Like that, I like being on stage. It's a home that I found. And a lot of people would say, what's the greatest memory you have on stage? Most musicians, you're going to talk about, there was this show because there was this many people, and this, and I talk about my parents not letting me really watch or listen to a lot of music, but my dad had this record collection, but he thought Johnny Cash was just it. So as I played music, as much as I believe that the strength to do what you're supposed to do comes from within, there was parts of me that were man, if I did this, maybe my dad would be proud of me. Maybe. So, you know what I mean? You're still, that happens, right? But it was, so there was, I wish I could lock down exactly if it was 100% pure, but I always thought if I could play a prison one day, that would be the show, And so I'd love to say it was 100% pure. I'm sure there was a percentage of that, like, oh, then I'd be like Johnny Cash and I played in a prison. My dad would respond to that. I think part of me wanted to prove that I could do it. Do you know what I mean? But maybe it wasn't 100% pure, but I knew that setting, although a lot of my team, a lot of musicians, a lot of people go, you played in prison? Like, what's that like? Or your own team is kind of like anxious because you're bringing in your drums and your guitars through how many sets of doors and security and them checking what you're bringing into prison, right? And so the intimidation, level by level as you set up, and then when you go into a prison, there's rules. Obviously, there's the no touch rule. Like you don't hug, shake hands, and stuff like that. You just no contact, and depending on maximum security, different things, right? But there's also, they won't bring in people from this gang into the room at the same time as this gang, depending on all this difference. They may not allow the guys and the girls into the same. So when you do that, all of a sudden it'll break down and make the crowd smaller. And now you're setting up one time to play, um, you know, with Maya, as you saw, she was in a lockdown facility, and there's 5 girls sitting in front of us. And it's awkward because there's 3, 4 of you performing, and there's 5 of you sitting in the audience. So there's no, like, if somebody's going like this, right? But if you allow these moments, or when they bring in inmates and they're looking just through this crack of insecurity because they want to see the Indian, you can read into all of these things. But if you dismantle that and you start to go back to, why are they doing that? What happened to them that made them cautious? Why don't they trust? Why are they curious? Why do they want to feel more in control of the situation? We're now presenting, let's say, and I'm speaking and I'm telling stories, and you have to listen to me. You didn't buy a ticket to this concert. You were told to come in here. So it's like, this isn't a fan of mine sitting in front of me. I have to win them over. But if you think about how did they get to that place where they have so much, instead of going, oh, cool, what's this? Maybe some of them are there thinking that. But if you think about why is there tension in the room? What did they go through to get to this place? Why don't they trust a presenter? What did a teacher say to them once? What did an officer do? Why do they, maybe I'm a bit of a person of authority in this moment because they're told to shut up and listen. I don't know what they were told before they walked into that room. So you think about all these things, but if you, again, dismantle it and go like, why are we in this? And then you can try to get to a moment of purity where they can see that you're genuine. That's what, and that's what they want to know. Why are you here? Like, did you get paid to come here? No. You're in debt. What are you going to sell us? Oh, you give out your music for free. Where are the cameras? Is this a publicity stunt? Well, and then when they see it's pure, and all of a sudden it's hours later, and suddenly a kid asks for a hug. And there's a no touch rule. And you look at the officer and this kid's crying in front of you. Can I have a hug? The cop is right beside you. Can I give him a hug? Yeah. And all of a sudden, you're watching these things, and hopefully even the guards are impacted and going there because there's somebody standing beside me, and they think they're there just protection, which is great, and they're doing their job and they have their protocol and stuff. But all of a sudden they're going, listen to this kid opening up. Do you know, and then you all just start to look at each other a little differently. But But yeah, these settings, and all of a sudden you go, what was your favorite show? Yeah, meeting Maya when she was one of 5 girls that we were performing for that day. And afterwards you're going, what's your story? What's your gift? And she goes, I love music. I actually write music. Oh, could you play something for me? And she grabs the guitar, my guitar, and she starts playing a song that she wrote called Choices. I'm secretly recording it with my iPhone. We go produce it. We come visit her a few months later because she's making better choices in lockdown. She's decided at 18, she's released. She asked if she could stay to help mentor the younger girls. She realizes her story could have an impact. We go set up a portable studio right there in lockdown. We record her song, produce it, play it back to her. And as you saw in the documentary, whenever we perform, we tell her story and she walks out and she performs with us. At the Calgary Saddle Dome, the arena that in her city, and now she's not just surviving, but she's significant. Her story's significant. She's being vulnerable, and that's a cool moment.
Rob, what does it feel like for you to see someone that your wonderful presence and your authenticity to the most degree allowed them to step out of their own shadows and begin to create a life for themselves that is out of passion, is out of their why, and they can see their importance. What does that feel like? So that if there's someone out there that's debating, do I do this project? Do I not do this project? Do I go out and volunteer or do I not volunteer? Would you share that feeling of seeing someone move along in their journey?
I think, well, I think the most amazing feeling is when somebody goes, like, I don't give a template. I never have of saying, tomorrow when you wake up, do this. Um, but this is getting back to where we started, difference between religion and belief. And one thing that just, I'm just, no one can convince me that there's not more to this world than what we see, is the fact that if you wake up and you say, I'm available, I'm going to watch for promptings in and around me. When you hear stories of somebody going, yeah, after the show, I saw this, I saw your show and I did this, or it mattered to me in this way. And then I got a prompting to do this. And it's something I never said, but it's like, you think you have to, let me back up. When you're talking about encouraging your audience, you don't have to do what I did. You don't have to go become, get a record deal and get a platform like that, and then walk away from a record deal and start a charity and go to prisons and all these places, because it's not for everybody. But if you wake up and say, on the way to work today, on the way to school, while at my job, I am available. I'm going to watch for things. It's unbelievable what you might see. And I try to keep my career and my personal life pretty separate. But I'll tell you that 2 days ago, this is the second time I've done this with my daughter and her friends, is the first time, they saw a lot of homeless people in our city, and there's a place called Tent City where homeless people just camp out, and we're driving and my daughter and her friends are like, what is that? And I was like, oh, it's called Tent City, where it's a lot of homeless people live, right? Like, why would they go there? It's cold outside, right? It's like, do you want to go find out? And so I talked to her friends' parents and stuff like that, and gave them some money and said, find out what they need: socks, gloves, backpack, water, granola bar, toothpaste, toothbrush. Put together some packages and let's go. And so we went and bought some hot coffee, and then we went out and we did that again this week. And you go sit down and they're like, what do we say? Like, you don't have to say anything. You can just listen. But all of a sudden, and I'm just driving and I say, you guys tell us where we're going. I know the area to go. And you guys point out where, like, you see that person, you see there's 4 people there. We're just driving. You guys tell me. All of a sudden, I think we should go talk to that person over there. Okay. Just like, not why her? Why not him? It's just like, I think we should go talk to her. Cool. Let's go find out why. So you go and you park the vehicle, get out. You want some coffee? Can we sit down and chat with you for a little bit? Start talking. So where are you from? You just listen to them, and all of a sudden, it's like most people are, get out of the way. I'm trying to get to work, And so it's like, and then you get in the vehicle and you drive away, right? And yeah, and all of a sudden you have these interactions. But if you start just doing that, you go, I'm available. I'll do something, and so we did that this weekend, and like that guy, the first person. So we pull up and roll down the window, and he was just at the red light, right? I was like, well, it's red. I don't know how long it's going to be red. So I just put on my hazards, rolled down the window, and in the backseat, they're like, would you like a gift? And he's like, what do you mean? And they pulled out his backpack, and he goes, and there's a bunch of backpacks, used backpacks in the back that they fill with stuff for guys and stuff with girls, feminine products. And so they just randomly grabbed one. They're all different. We just collected bags, right? Hey, do you have backpacks you don't use anymore? We filled them with stuff. And she holds up the first person and goes, here. And he goes, oh, my backpack. And then it was like, what? And he grabs it and he goes, it's not is this brand new? This is just like the backpack I had. It's a blue one, except this one's nicer and somebody stole it from me. But his first thing was, my backpack is being returned to me. And it's like, here. Oh, wow. Well, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in you. How are you doing today? Oh, you start talking, and then, I just want to give you that. And all of a sudden, this guy goes, God bless. And then he goes, I don't know what the reference was, but he goes, do you know the Bible verse? Philippians 3, verse 16? I don't know what it is. If you look, I don't know. I just threw one out. But we're like, no, what is it? And he goes, I don't know. I just wanted to know what it was. Like, this came to his head. You know what this verse is? And we're like, we thought he was about to share something with us profound. No, what is it? He goes, I don't know. I was hoping you could tell me what it is. And the shyest girl in the group turns, she goes, it says this. And she just verbatim knows it. He's like, wow. And then now in the meantime, some people it's a green light already, and people are going, and then what they hand the backpack out, we drive out, and then everybody around the cars are like, cool. Sorry for like getting impatient. That was kind of neat, Then I turned to this girl, man, how'd you know that? Like, I grew up in Sunday school and church, and I still read, but I'm like, I couldn't. How'd you know? She goes, that was like my favorite verse since like growing up. That was just probably the one verse that I could have quoted. And I was like, oh. And so you think, again, you don't have to leave your career right now. You don't have to become a musician, start a chair. You don't have to start your own podcast. But what would you see if you opened your eyes? What would you see if you looked outside of yourself? And it's very easy, and we have to take care of ourselves, but it's very easy to be, especially in the West, we're so self-absorbed. But what would you see if you looked, you know?
Whew, that's quite something, honestly, Rob. So much in that. I'd like to know, I could see through the documentary how much you care. You genuinely care. And the documentary does go into how much strain all these shows, 150 shows a year for multiple years, and you stand there for hours talking to these kids and really caring about them. I'd love to know how that translates to your personal life, as you mentioned it, how do you keep a balance somehow in taking care of you now and taking care of your family and not bringing a lot of the challenges you see out in the world into your own life and letting it affect your marriage and your relationship with your kids? And I'd love to know that.
Yeah, it's yeah, it goes there a lot in the documentary. And again, I've done a lot of radio, TV, podcast interviews, and not every one of them gets to go as deep as you and I do, why I'm always excited to talk with you. But, in that documentary, all of a sudden you're sitting down for 12, 13, whatever, how many hours over a couple of days of being interviewed where they start asking you those questions, but you also they're going to places, they're asking you what life was like at 7 years old, which you don't usually get into in a quick interview because they want to know about your favorite moment on stage or the first suicide note that was given to you, which are all incredible stories. But it's rare that we go to those places. And then in the documentary, there's interviews with my drummer and my team. And if I hadn't lost of my dad 2 days before that whole scene, we probably would have seen a little more family stuff. But our family's going through a lot at that time. But you heard a lot of people you know, I was, there's a moment where my drummer talks about we're in mid concert, and this happened more than once, where, you know, I'm dealing with pain still from my accident, my recovery, and still having surgeries. They rebuilt my head, and I tell a story, and then we'll play a 45-second video of somebody we met on tour on the big screens, and I'll sneak behind the screens. And you heard my drummer say I could hear Rob throwing up behind the screens while this video is playing. Then I came back out, and those aren't stories that I probably would have told because I don't want to make it, man, because he's like, and he comes out, acts like nothing happened and that he's not going through anything. Um, because I don't want to make it sound like this happened to me and I still kept going. Look at me. But you saw as they asked me a lot of questions and asked the team, and you could see that the tour itself, and I was dealing with pain, and I was still dealing with, as we talked about last time, you'll see, and everyone could see in the documentary, prescriptions. I was on painkillers and different things as I was trying to struggle with this. I was dealing with all that stuff still in the midst of everything. It's not like hey, I'm 100% and now I can go share my story, which again, there's another big piece. You don't have to wait if you're waiting till your life is perfect before you start to share your story, you will never share your story. So it's important to just like, hey, I'm still in the midst of what I'm dealing with, but I'm a little better than I was yesterday, and I think it's worth sharing, or I had a really bad day yesterday, so, oh, wow, I also had a bad day yesterday. So what came out a lot in the documentary is people started to ask about the years being on the road was the drain. And, I can talk about this memory of being in front of 5 kids, Maya being one of them, and getting to interact with her. But all of a sudden, dealing with pain, dealing with medications, dealing with the lack of sleep, with all the injuries. And then you perform and you're vulnerable and you're sharing your story, which is not fun. Even though we have fun in our show, we tell jokes, but it's not fun. It's not, you're being vulnerable. And then you've got to be completely focused as Maya shares her story with you. And then you record it with your phone, and then you're producing the song, and then you got to be wired. The next day you're doing another one. And as you saw in the documentary, we would set up in the beginning before we did our bigger shows, we would go, we'd go to do a school in the morning. The guys would be tearing down the screens, the drums, the lights, all that stuff, packing it up, and they'd go off to the next school, and I'm still there talking with kids. And you better be 100% focused, right? And you're listening, you're taking all this in. And so I had to put a team around me of people that cared and looked for me. So once every 2 weeks, I have a meeting here where people, it's just how you doing, Rob? And I had to find my own support team, which I wasn't doing, where all of a sudden, yeah, you're so focused, um, and it becomes an addiction that, like, I can't stop. I can't not do a show tomorrow. I can't say that I need a rest because who who is potentially going to have a breakthrough, and I can't, so that's another thing, like, for all of us. I'm sure there's something you have to look for too, like, we sit here and you're absorbing everything I'm saying. Tomorrow you'll have another guest and you'll have to absorb what they're saying, and you've got to take care of yourself. And I'm so curious. Tell me about that painting behind you. Who made the stay positive thing? Why did you choose those two? Those are very important things to you. There's a reason that you have those two things behind you, right? So, but you're wired in a way that you're listening and you're finding ways to draw stories out of me. The times I have asked people about the stuff around them and their stories, it's like, well, this isn't about me, it's about you. And so it's difficult for me to not find out more about you, but I know why we're here, right? So I'm allowing it to happen. I'm allowing to. I don't like dominating. Well, let's talk more about me, but I understand it. But yeah, that drain, and all of a sudden, I'll say this, as we mentioned maybe 4 minutes ago, we live in a self-absorbed world where we only look after ourselves, and that's not good. You should do something for somebody else. But then you getting caught in the other boat where you're only looking after other people, you're not looking after yourself, and then you're useless to everybody. So for every mile of road, there's 2 miles of ditch. You don't want to get caught in either ditch, and for me, as you'll see in that documentary, yeah, I got overwhelmed and almost burnt out, and suddenly what was, even if it would have been, and I'm not saying it was, but let's say it was a pure motive, I just want to help people. I hope there was more purity in it. I hope there is more purity in what I do than not. But no matter how much you're doing that, if you're not careful, all of a sudden you're completely drained and you can't even, you get home and you have days off and you're just like, you're so out of it that you don't see that person at the red light. You don't check in on your brother, your own family. You're not there for your kids, your wife, your husband. You're not there for your mom, your dad. You're all of a sudden you've sacrificed something. And yeah, I definitely got there, because I just didn't want to stop, and I needed people around me that could call me out on it, as you saw. Said, Rob, this could be the end of not just this tour of the career, but if you're not careful, you won't be, may not be here,
Well, what's your blend right now to still take care of you?
Mm-hmm.
Be there for your family, because I'm very sure that you cared very deeply to your relationship with your wife, to your kids, to your immediate family, and to your friends, as well as the Robb Nash project. So, what's that blend that allows you to take care of Rob? Because you said it beautifully, Rob. What good is any wonderful leader if they're not around anymore?
Yeah.
I mean, I look at history and I see that and go, God, these were wonderful leaders. What a shame no one was there to go, we need to take care of you also.
Yeah. Well, number one, you could talk to anyone in my family and I'd, um, you know, ask my kids if I've been a perfect dad. Ask my wife if I've been a perfect husband. I am flawed throughout, but again, I'm willing to start over. And yeah, the balance thing was tough, and you always have to, you can get caught again in routine, right? And you begin to just continue down that path, right? And being willing to adjust and being willing to adapt and be aware of what's going on around you, where you've been, where you are impacting people, not just positively, but where all of a sudden you're lacking and your relationship is lacking and your friendships are lacking and your family is lacking. So like being aware of these things. So we toured, I won't say some of the names, but I remember one show, there was maybe 10, 12,000 people. And we were touring we were about to do our first show with this band that I, I was such a fan of, Canadian band. And they had a song that was number one in the US, which is, if you can have a number one in the US, you're doing good, right? That's as much as we've got some Canadian bands that have never been heard down there that are legends in Canada. If you can make it in the US, that's just a bigger market, overseas, whatever. But this band we were playing with, they had a song and for 7 weeks was number one in the US. You meet them backstage, you're like, oh, congrats. Like, wow, like this is our dream. Like, I want that. And man, they were tired. And they're like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're hoping this happens. And if that happens, we might be able to do this. And if that happens, this could happen. And then we were hoping this happened. And it's like, and then we might get a little bit of time off. That would be awesome. And I was like, oh, wow, you have to fight that hard and you're sacrificing that much. And we were just like, yeah, I had some top 10 hits, but we were never became the big thing. You know, we were the opening act for a lot of the big things. We played some big crowds and stuff, but I was like, oh, what would I be sacrificing? I know what it took out of me in Canada to, and now we want to do this in the States and overseas. And that was the plan. We were going to go do these things, right? They were getting ready to bring us for a showcase in LA and see if we could make it in the States, right? And I'm thinking, man, I don't want that. I don't want all my life to fall, like to be such a struggle. But I was also upset at them. I was like, oh, if this happens, then we might be able to do this. And if this happens, that could lead to this. And I'm like, you made it. Like, you're not even excited. Like, enjoy it, you jerks. And then we got on stage and I looked in the audience, and again, there's maybe 10,000 people there. And you look in the audience and you can just tell that when this happens, but those four dudes, those four young guys are 4 18-year-olds that are in a band. And you can tell, you can just see that, right? Like, you're aware of your crowd. I'm like, oh, those are young musicians right there. I'm like, and then all of a sudden I realized I'm looking at the band we're opening for going, you made it, enjoy it. And those kids are looking at us going, you made it, enjoy it. Like, we want to be up there. And I'm going, well, we want to be the guys backstage waiting to go on. And they want to be the Rolling Stones, and you're like, it's so you're always in your career, in your life, like, watch where you're going, and you may not always have a plan for the next step, but as you saw in the documentary, I was like, we're doing a show in the morning, a show in the afternoon, sometimes a show in the evening. But one thing I learned in the industry there is like, you have to, if you want to stay at the top, you have to constantly be touring and promoting and going and going. And I told my team, if you do this with me, you will be flown home every weekend to be with your families. We'll go on the road for a week. We will be home for a week, and we can do work from home. We'll go on the road, because we work a lot with schools. There's Christmas break, there's spring break, there's summer holidays. So being aware of your surroundings, but also when we got to one show in the morning, one show in the afternoon, and we still couldn't meet the demand. They still wanted this many more shows and this many more communities, this many more cities. And yesterday I got a call, can you come to the States? And can you come to this region? Can you come to this region? And okay. Yes, I want, yes, we'll do that. Yes. But bringing the right people around you, as you saw, I started going, if we can't meet the demand of going doom, 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 2, 3 a day. But what if we put together a team, and Jarrett was in the documentary where I brought him up and said, can you help us put this in and bring, what if we could bring 10 schools together for a show? We could reach way more people and it wouldn't be as big of a drain. But you have to be willing to adapt and absorb. And um, there's a great book called From Success to Significance. We talked a little bit about this, but because you're saying how do you apply these things and make sure not everybody can relate to record deals and performances and being drained like that, of listening to stories of suicidal people. Like, that's not everybody's life, but this is something, I believe we talked about this last time, but if you want to apply this, how do you apply these things to your life? It's, how do you take care of your own family? So you can apply this to your marriage, your friendships, your relationships, your business, your health. There's days when this book talks about, there's days when you're in survival mode and you're just trying to make it. Let's say it's your marriage or your finances. You're just trying to survive. You're trying to keep your marriage together. You're trying to keep your family together. You're trying to keep your bills paid. You're trying to keep your job. You're surviving. And we go survival, and then you try to get to stability. Okay, our marriage is a little more stable now, or our finances are more stable, or my job feels more stable. Okay, that's good. You don't want to stop there. You go from stability to success. It's like, and that's what the West has taught us: to get to success, and you're good. This book talks about going from one step further in success to significance. And significance is where maybe your job, your gifts could have an impact on the people around you. Maybe you're a photographer, or maybe work at a music store, or you sell car insurance, and somebody comes in and you can just see there's something off, and you just give them a little more attention. How you doing? I know you don't want to be buying car insurance today, but you just give them a little bit of yourself, and you do those things. And if you can keep your cup full, that people can drink from it as well. And be aware when you're running low, and don't drain yourself totally. But if you work as a photographer and you can teach a kid to photography one day, show them, do you want to see how I do this? You work at a music store and you can spend a little time with a kid that's buying his first guitar. If you're selling, I don't know why I'm picking car insurance, but if you're selling car insurance, nobody buys insurance. Normally you buy something that you want to use. You don't buy insurance because you want to use it. You hope you never have to use it, and you invest in it every year. But day that I have to buy my car insurance. Oh, this sucks. And so nobody's in a good scenario. It's the same when I go to a hospital. I know that nobody in that hospital waiting room is having a good day. If I can take care of myself to the place where that whoever's sitting next to me, it's how quiet are hospital waiting rooms when you're waiting for your appointment? It's quiet, nobody's talking, and everybody has one thing in common. They don't want to be there. They're going through something. And all of a sudden, if you've taken care of yourself a bit, even if you're there because something's up physically, you need to get checked, but you're emotionally doing okay, all of a sudden you ask the person beside you, hey, what are you in for? Or how are you doing? You have kids? All of a sudden, you can use your cup and pour a little bit into somebody else's empty cup. And that's why it's important to take care of yourself and find that balance. And guess what? When you give a little bit to somebody else, I say that to young people all the time. Have you ever helped a friend that's going through something? Yeah. When you're helping them, are you thinking about yourself and your own issues? No. Who are you thinking about? Them. Like, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, when you get to your room, like, get out of your room once in a while. Get outside. I think that's why COVID was really difficult on people, right? Because we're meant to feed off of each other a little bit and feed into each other. See?
Rob, I think I really understand the significance of the documentary much more now that we've talked. And I know I didn't go into every details of the documentary, but I'm going to say to the audience, as soon as it comes out, you guys genuinely need to see this. But what I got out of it is how important it is to find your own significance, how to understand what happiness is that the West has sold us on what success is and what happiness is. And that documentary, through your journey and through sharing the journey of these incredible young individuals that are very brave to share their stories and see them and what they're doing and how they are a reason why anyone can make it also if they choose to. That's what that documentary is about. Yes, it's Rob. Yes, it's these wonderful young individuals and their stories, but it's the idea of how do we become more significant than who we are and not simply fall into the traps of success, being the bigger band, playing at bigger stages, and continually like running after stuff, but showing up more as who we are and where our impact. And I think that's a dawning moment for me to go, oh. So I didn't ask a ton of details about the documentary itself. I really would love for people to see it and to come around and go, let me learn a little more.
Yeah. And understand this, and I'm pointing to a gold record behind me if you're listening, but you learn very quickly if you're in this industry, it's not real. They literally have you're in a radio interview or you're at something and all of a sudden they pop in, Rob, you got to go. We got to be at the next place right away. You have nowhere to be.
Mm.
You get out of there because you want to make it look like you're really, really important. Oh, I only have a few minutes for you. And then you're like, we don't know where to be right now. Like, there's times you're really busy, don't get me wrong. But it's like, okay, you're going to be in here for about 12 minutes and we're going to come and bust you out of there and make it seem like you are too cool to just have this much time on your hands, So you learn pretty quickly a lot of this is fake. So, but you do have some cameras around you and all that footage that you watched in that documentary over the years of me touring. There was a guy who has 3 Emmy nominations, who's worked on a lot of massive movies, who saw a show, and he just started saying, whenever I can, I'm going to come follow you and just take some footage because maybe somebody's going to want to see this story one day. So although a lot of this industry is fake, there was a camera following a little while, a lot of the time. So you got to see it. But most people don't have a physical documentary about their life. But every one of you watching, listening, you have your own documentary. You're creating it right now. You have a history. You have a past. You may have some trauma. And if you don't, at some point you will. You will lose somebody. You will go through tragedy. You will have successes. There are moments you will be surviving. There will moments you'll be stable. There will be moments you'll feel successful. There are moments you won't know what happiness feels like. There are moments you'll be wanting a little bit more, and there's moments when you wish you would have given a little more. You are shooting your own documentary right now, whether there are cameras following you or not. What would you want your documentary to look like? I said it pretty early in this podcast, but you might get to the place, and not everyone does, where you wonder if anyone would notice if you're gone. Make people notice if you were gone. Do something. And when you do those things, all of a sudden that little lie in your head that says the world doesn't need me, or I don't really make a difference, You can make a difference on an individual. You can make a difference with a kitten at Humane Society. You can make, sorry, I don't know if you have Humane Society. It's a place where you can foster and adopt animals. You can make a difference and go volunteer. Again, you don't have to quit your job, but have your kids know that once a month, my mom goes and she volunteers at the soup kitchen for 3 hours. It's not that difficult. Wow, when when my dad was fueling up a car, he bought a drink for the person that was pumping the gas. And it's not that complex. Life isn't that difficult. Significance is not a massive journey. Significance is little tiny moments. You are shooting your own documentary, whether there are cameras following you or not. What does it say?
Rob, what would you like to say to Tom, Steve, to Anthony, to all the wonderful people that showed up to help navigate and move you along this journey? Because it's very clear through the documentary, and I said it on our previous podcast, nobody does anything alone.
Yeah.
Life is not meant to be lived alone. What would you say to these individuals that came along and still come along? Because you're still a volunteer organization, you're still a nonprofit, you're still doing all these things. You're not being paid for these concerts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you do need a team. You can't do things alone. To tie it back to with what I was just saying to what you know, I have an incredible team that are a part of what I do, but I'm a part of what they do, and I don't want to, like, when I keep saying you might not have a record deal, you might not have a big vision, and it's true, but I don't want to negate, don't be scared to dream, because there's not a lot of dreamers out there, so if you've got a vision, chase it. It may not be your career tomorrow, but go for it. Be a big thinker. Things will happen. But if you don't have your own big dream, find someone that does. Be a part of it. And I have felt in debt much of my life. She's talking about Steve. She's talking about Anthony. Just a couple examples of people in the documentary. Steve and Anthony are multi-platinum producers. They worked
Let that sink in, guys.
Yeah, some massive juggernauts that I was intimidated to work with when I got the record deal. They now, they work with me. Steve is actually the vice president of the Robb Nash project, and he does sound for us at our shows. He does so much business for us. Anthony, who I was intimidated to hold a guitar in front of, plays guitar for me on tour now. He has joined me. And I used to feel massively indebted to them for the years of volunteering. And like, I make a living doing these things. We don't charge schools or anything like that, but I always felt in debt to all these people that started off volunteering and putting in countless hours, like Steve and Anthony, before I could give them $1, Karen, Tyler, like all these people that there's so many people, right? That I fell in debt with them. And I think that was one of the things that spoke to me most, probably the documentary, is I saw them explaining as they were getting interviewed, because normally I'm the guy getting interviewed. You didn't call, and ask to talk to my tour manager today. You wanted to talk to me. So I get a lot. I take more selfies with people. I sign a few more autographs than everybody. And you kind of feel like, oh, there's so many more people. I want people to know that I didn't hang those lights. I'd be terrified. I didn't drive back the semi truck into the back to load in the gear. I don't know how to do. I'm a storyteller. But I happen to be the front man, and I feel guilty that I'm the one that you're Robb Nash, and my drummer's standing there going, I'm the drummer, you know. So I felt in debt because so many people do things, but in that documentary, I got to see, and you got to see, and you will all get to see that. Oh wow, this is fulfilling for them too. Um, yeah, as I was felt indebted to everybody that, but I realized that they're experiencing these steps of understanding what significance feels like, and yeah, and you start to realize you've had an impact not just on those individuals that gave you suicide notes, but yeah, dreaming big allowed some other people to use their gifts to dream big too, and they get to experience that same satisfaction. They might not sign the autograph, they might not have the kid hand them the suicide note, but you saw it in the documentary, right? Steve, Anthony, multi-platinum producers, both at the end saying, yeah, that we've had some commercial success, but this is different. This feels good. This feels like we're having a lasting impact. And again, they both came from an industry where it's a lot of pressure and it's just success, success, success. And man, by dreaming and chasing significance, you can inspire and help other people build a team that gets to do that as well. As a so that helps me understand and feel a lot better. That was a cool moment to watch in the documentary because I wasn't in the room when they were getting interviewed and asked about, and I was so happy for them to see that somebody is going, tell us your involvement, tell us what you bring to the table, tell us the impact that you feel that you're having, and they got to be on camera, and there's so many more people on our team that I wish were, but everybody got to see, hopefully in the documentary, sounds like you did, that it took a whole team. It takes a whole team. And I was so happy that they got the spotlight throughout that thing because it's incredible.
I'm going to personally thank you. And I said it before, I think we hit the record button. I got a gigantic nugget out of this documentary out of valuing someone's time and who they are and what they do. And when you get the opportunity to be in front of them, to be with them, to take it to a level of how do I serve you? And I got that from your documentary and hearing your story because I reach out to all kinds of wonderful individuals, but it made me so much aware of like, how do I become significant to that person to really show them that I care? I'm not reaching out just because I'm looking to put a podcast out there that I'm looking for people to go, oh, look at her podcast. And no, how do I share who you are? Because that's the impact. And I got that so much from your documentary and hearing how much you gave of yourself and how sick you became to go, you really got to care about the individual. When you reach out to someone, you really have to care about them because who they are is what's making whatever mission that they're on impactful. I use impactful, you use significant. So I want to thank you, Rob. Genuinely want to thank you for who you are and what you do and your wonderful communication and sharing all the little tidbits of even when you're sitting next to someone, opening up a conversation because that could be very important to someone. Is there anything that you'd like to say that I didn't get a chance to ask you yet? Because I could sit here and talk to you for several hours, but I'm honoring your time and honoring who you are. And we'll catch up in a different podcast. But is there anything that you'd like to say that I didn't ask? Or that you'd like this documentary to do?
Yes, there's something I would like to say. Tell me about one of the two paintings behind you. Why did you choose them?
I'm going to tell you about both of them.
Perfect.
The Stay Positive is a beautiful piece that was created by my niece for me for my 50th birthday. She painstakingly took a long time to etch out each of these letters, their actual drawings that she etched out and she put on here. And it means so much to me that she cared so much to invest her time and energy to give me something that is meaningful to me and is meaningful to her. So it's very important. The message is great. And then this other piece is a friend of mine who understood what my podcast was about, attitude of altitude, raising our own thinking and becoming a lot more in tune to who we are. And he took the messages of my podcast, kindness, respect, understanding, love, gratitude. These are words of what compassion is made of. I think, not I think, I know that's what compassion is made of, and actually doing something. He took the letters and he embedded them into each one of these cells. So if you're up close, you can see the word gratitude. You can see respect, understanding, and love. And that's the message. When I walk into this room and I feel these two paintings, I go, okay, I'm ready to chat with someone. I'm ready to really be listening to someone because it allows me to remember I'm still growing every day. I'm still learning every day to become a better human being. And those are the significance of those two pieces. So I love the energy in this room. And right across from me, you can't see it, I bought a painting, not a painting, a photo that someone enlarged that she took of those wish things where dandelion that has all these spokes and their wishes. And that's what I stare at when I look at the practice of the wishes of the genuine, better humanity through individuals that I get to speak with and get to share their messages. So that's those.
See that? So it's like somebody took their emotion, put it into a painting, and it means something to you, but you influenced what that painting was, like, so it's like you feed off of each other. And now maybe you've been asked this 100 times from other guests, but now you get to share why somebody made that painting, how you choosing even just the title of your podcast, you choosing the words, them seeing those characteristics in you gets them to implant that in from a young person, a niece, to a friend. Yeah, that's wonderful. And now an inspiration to your listeners as well, going, oh, now I know a little bit more about her, and the people around you, right? It's
Wow.
it and you're so good at this to go, tell me about, I noticed this, tell me about, explain it, draw things out of people, and um I had no motive in this, but next time you're on a call with somebody, oh, that's one thing. I had somebody tell me this the other day. If you ever see, especially a guy wearing a piece of jewelry, there's a story. I was like, interesting. Like, ask people about this. Why did you choose that moment? Why did you choose that color? Why, yeah, why did you choose this place? Yeah, questions. Draw people out their stories and find out a little bit more about their documentary.
I am going to say one more thing that you just reminded me. In the documentary, one of the therapists talks about the contradiction that we've learned looking at you, Rob, going, you're wearing leather, you got a mohawk, and the look and tattoos and so on. And then they see the stage presence and the impact that the audience is having from you being on stage. And it's that contradiction that we've been taught to look at someone in a certain way. And I think that's the stigma that is so significant in the documentary, in doing a podcast, is to break out of all these imagery that we've been taught to look at someone in a certain way and not see a complete individual.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so true. And I chose very much to look the way I do. Um, I want to be able to get that tough guy at the back room. If the girl wants to look at the cute guy on the stage, they'll find somebody. It doesn't have to be me. Um, but I want to show man, they can be edgy and tough on the outside and still be full of compassion and grace, love on the inside. You should look for that in people. And yeah, um, one of the songs on my album, people say you can be, oh, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. I have a song that says I'm a sheep in lion's clothing. People aren't expecting anything. They expect a certain thing from you. So, and that is, if you ask me, my favorite moment of that documentary is right that moment. There's a contradiction to Rob. You see the tattoos, um, and then they said, but he doesn't walk with that. And I'm glad people can see that. But in that moment in the documentary, it shows me on an indigenous reserve, and I don't know if you'll remember the moment, but it's just a brief shot of all these 6, 7, 5-year-old indigenous kids running up and just hugging me around my legs and just like this. And guess what? They don't see leather and tattoos and automatically assume something. We're taught our biases and our stereotypes, but that moment right there, they don't see any of that, like, and that is my favorite moment of the documentary. Do you
I know
remember that moment?
I
Did you?
do, and
Do
I
you?
know we
Yeah.
can take this conversation so much further, but I really am going to honor your time. I really am going to honor who you are. Anything else you'd like to say to anybody before we go off this podcast?
I will say this, that you say you're going to honor my time by letting me go, but spending time with me is honoring my time as well. And I really appreciate you and honored me. You honored me with your work, your listeners, your niece, your friend. It's You are an honorable person, and it's unfortunately rare. And it's good that you put that out there for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And I think we're going to have a lot more honorable people out there because of the work that we're doing so that people can shine and can show up and can become a lot more authentic in themselves. So, for our wonderful listeners, please remember our attitude always, always determines our altitude in life. And it doesn't mean climbing up to a certain number, it's becoming the best that we can and learning from each other and honoring each other and respecting each other and loving each other. If you love this podcast, please, please go watch the documentary when it comes out. Look up Robb Nash, find out about their project, and spread the information. That's how we can honor each other. Thank you, and I appreciate you.
If you are looking, you can go to Robb Nash. I spell Rob with two B's, robbnash.com. I believe the trailer of the documentary is out on the website. And when you are looking for it, the documentary is titled If You're Reading This, which out of almost 1,000 suicide notes I've been given, that is how most of them start. Mom, Dad, if you're reading this, dot, dot,
That
dot.
gave me chill when I saw that note, when I heard it. It still gives me chill to this day when you say it, Rob. A great title. A great title.
So
Thank you.
we
And
do this again one day, right?
yes, you can find them on Instagram, on LinkedIn. You can go to their website. They're always looking for people that care, that can step up. So let's be our best selves in that. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.